She believed the lock would end the story. That was her mistake. I was preparing the bathing room behind the governor's house when the owner's wife entered and locked the door behind her. I was in the tub testing water temperature. She was between me and the only exit. The bolt slid shut from inside a sound that meant isolation, vulnerability, power, operating in darkness. She spoke calmly, framing the moment as misunderstanding that must remain private. She warned me that opening the door would make things worse, that others might believe I had improper intentions. But I remembered my uncle's teaching. Coercion needs privacy, and privacy dies when witnesses arrive. So I reached for the service bell on the wall. I rang 3 times routine requests. Nothing alarming. I called out loudly for towels and water, naming the room clearly so anyone passing would know where I was and who was present. Footsteps approached. Voices answered from the corridor. The lock that gave her absolute power became her vulnerability when witnesses assembled outside. She had to choose: open the door and end the encounter, or keep it closed and make the situation more suspicious with every passing moment she opened it. Not from mercy, but because isolation was broken and rooms lose their power when they gain witnesses. So I ask you now, what happens when the locked door that should have ended everything becomes the sound that saves you? I am assigned to prepare the bathing room behind the governor's house, hauling water and laying clean cloths. The work begins at dawn. The bathing room is separate from the main house's small brick structure, connected by a covered walkway. It has 1 door, 1 high window, walls thick enough to muffle sound. I carry buckets from the well, 4 trips to fill the copper tub. The water is cold. It will warm when I add heated water from the kitchen. Steam will fill the room, will soften the air, will make everything feel closer than it is. I lay clean cloths on the wooden bench, white linen, folded precisely. The governor's wife requires specific arrangements. Everything must be positioned exactly, must meet standards she inspects, but never explains. I observe how servants enter freely but leave quietly, as if the walls listen. We move through this space efficiently, speaking only when necessary. The room feels heavy, even when empty, as if it remembers things we are not permitted to remember. There is no memory, yet only the understanding that privacy here is power. The governor's family uses this room for bathing, for dressing, for moments they do not want observed. Privacy is luxury. Privacy is privilege. Privacy is also danger when you are alone with someone who holds power over your body and your life. I step into the tub when the work is done, testing water temperature with my hand. The water is ready. The room is ready. I should leave now, should return to other duties. But the morning is cold, and the heated water is here, and no one has arrived yet for their bath. I step in fully, allowing myself this moment of warmth before the day's labor truly begins. My hand finds the bronze weight in my pocket before I undress. It is still there. I place it carefully on the bench where I can see it, where it will not be lost or taken. The water is almost hot. I close my eyes briefly. Just a moment. Just this small theft of comfort. Steam fills the room, and footsteps stop outside. I hear them clearly, heels on brick. The particular sound of the governor's wife's boots. She walked with purpose, with the confidence of someone who expects space to clear before her. I observe the latch turn from the wrong side. Not a knock, not an announcement. The door simply opens. She enters and sees me in the tub. Her expression does not change. She does not apologize or retreat. She simply stands there, looking at me as if my presence is the intrusion, not hers. "Out," she says. Her voice is calm, authoritative. I move to stand, to exit, to apologize for presuming to use water prepared for her. But she steps further into the room and closes the door behind her. The latch clicks. Then I hear the bolt slide, the internal lock that can only be operated from inside the room. The sudden enclosure triggers a faint memory of doors closed during disputes back home. I remember a conflict in my village between 2 families over debt. The creditor brought the debtor into a storage house to discuss terms. Privately, when the debtor's family tried to enter, they found the door barred from inside. By the time the door opened, The debtor had agreed to terms he would never have accepted in open air, with witnesses present. My uncle explained it later. Closed doors change power. What someone might resist in daylight, they accept in darkness. What they might refuse with witnesses, they consent to in isolation. I stay still and listen. The steam is thick now. The room feels smaller. She locks the door, speaking calmly as if order makes truth. "There's been a misunderstanding," she says, her voice measured. "You are not supposed to be here, but now that you are, we must handle this properly." I observe how Status lowers her voice and sharpens her certainty. She is not loud. She does not threaten explicitly. She simply speaks as if her version of events is already established, already true, already beyond questioning. "You entered my private bathing room uninvited," she continues. "You used facilities meant for family. This is a serious breach of household rules." I opened my mouth to explain I was preparing the room. I was only testing the water. I would have left immediately if she had not, but she raises one hand slightly. "I'm not interested in excuses," she says. "I'm interested in resolving this quietly. If others learn of this incident, they might misunderstand. They might think worse things than what occurred, and then I would have no choice but to enforce appropriate discipline." Her confidence recalls elders misusing ceremony to command silence. I remember a chief who accused a young trader of disrespect during a public gathering. The accusation was vague, unsupported by specific incident. But the chief used formal procedures called witnesses, demanded explanations, created a structure that made defense seem like further disrespect. The trader was punished not for wrongdoing, but for failing to submit quietly to accusation. My uncle told me afterward, ceremony is not always justice. Sometimes it is weapon. Learn to recognize when ritual is being used to prevent questions rather than answer them. I keep my eyes down and my breathing steady. I am standing in the tub now, water dripping from my body, vulnerable and exposed. "I understand," I say quietly. She frames the moment as a misunderstanding that must remain contained. "You understand the situation then?" she says. Not a question. A statement that requires agreement. "Yes, ma'am. And you understand that speaking of this to other servants, to anyone would only make things worse for you. People might think you had improper intentions. They might believe you created this situation deliberately." I observe how quickly reputation arranges the story. In her telling, I become the aggressor. My presence in the tub becomes evidence of wrongdoing. Her entry becomes justified response. The locked door becomes protection rather than threat. The tone triggers a clearer memory of councils where space decided guilt. I remember judicial proceedings in Elmina, where location mattered as much as testimony. Accusations made in public require public defense, but accusations made in private spaces inside homes, inside storage rooms, inside places where only two people were present, became contests of credibility. And credibility belonged to whoever had higher status, more witnesses, better reputation. He entered my home without permission. A merchant once claimed about an apprentice. The apprentice insisted he was delivering goods as instructed, but the incident occurred inside the merchant's private quarters. No witnessing, no proof. The apprentice's word against the merchant's authority. The apprentice lost. I realized the room itself is the weapon. Not what happens in it, but the fact that it is private, enclosed, isolated from verification. Whatever story emerges from this room will be shaped by who has the power to tell it credibly. And that person is not me. I note the bell cord on the wall and the narrow window high above. The bell cord is near the Dora-braided rope that connects to bells in the main house kitchen. It is meant to summon servants when the person bathing requires assistance. The window is 8 feet up, narrow, designed for ventilation rather than view or escape. Too high to reach, too small to climb through even if I could reach it. I observe which sounds travel through the house. The walls are thick brick, but the door is wood. Voices might carry if loud enough. Footsteps in the corridor might be audible from inside. The sight triggers my memory of elders' teaching that open air dissolves coercion. My uncle told me about negotiations that went wrong because they happened in enclosed spaces. A merchant who seems reasonable in the market becomes aggressive in his back room, he said. A buyer who seems fair in daylight makes threats after dark. Coercion needs privacy. It needs isolation. It needs you to believe no one will hear or help or witness. "So, what do?" I asked him. "You make the room less private. You speak loudly enough that others hear. You move toward doors and windows. You create witnesses even if you cannot see them. You make the powerful person aware that their actions might be observed, might be questioned, might have consequences beyond the immediate moment." I begin counting seconds. The governor's household operates on strict schedule. Kitchen staff are preparing breakfast. Laundry staff are collecting linens. Someone will need a pass through this corridor soon. If I can make noise at the right moment, if I can signal distress without direct accusation, if I can turn this private room into a public situation, the power dynamic changes. She warns me of consequences. If the door opens, if anyone comes, she says, her voice lower now, more intense. You will tell them everything is fine. You will tell them you are helping me. You will smile and be pleasant. Do you understand? I observe fear, hidden inside certainty. She is trying to control not just me, but the narrative, the potential witnesses, the version of events that might emerge if this moment becomes public. Her fear tells me something important. She knows this situation is dangerous for her too. Not as dangerous as it is for Mishiha's status, family position, the automatic credibility that comes with being the governor's wife, but dangerous enough that she wants to prevent witnesses, wants to control the story, wants to end this interaction on her terms. No memory now, only calculation. Silence is her shield. Silence protects her more than it protects me. If this remains private, she controls the outcome completely. If it becomes public event, ambiguously public, she loses some of that control. That gap between her power in private and her vulnerability in public is my only leverage. I understand, I say again, but I am measuring the distance to the bell cord. I am listening for footsteps in the corridor. I am preparing to make the choice that might save me or destroy me. I hear movement in the corridor linen carts, quiet steps. The sounds are faint but distinct. Wheels on brick, the soft shuffle of servants moving efficiently through morning routines. The laundry staff collecting soiled linens from yesterday, delivering clean ones for today. I observe routine continuing beyond the door. The house operates, work proceeds. People are close not in this room, not aware of what is happening here, but close enough that sound might reach them if sound is made. The normalcy triggers my memory of danger hidden inside calm. I remember walking through Elmina's market on a day that seemed ordinary. Merchants selling, buyers, negotiating, children running between stalls. Then I heard a sharp cry from inside a trader's stall brief, cut off quickly. Most people continued their business. The market was loud, and one voice among many is easily lost. But my uncle heard it too. He walked toward the stall, casual but purposeful. He called out greeting to the trader, asked about goods, created presence and attention. The trader emerged, looking annoyed but controlled. A young apprentice followed, face carefully neutral. Later, my uncle explained. Something was wrong. I don't know what, but wrong things happen in private until you make them public. Sometimes just walking toward danger is enough. Sometimes just being willing to see prevents what should not be seen. I decide witnesses must be summoned without accusation. I cannot shout help or danger. That would be direct challenge, would force confrontation, would give a justification to claim I was unruly or threatening. But I can create legitimate reason for the door to open. I can summon assistance through proper channels. I can turn this private moment into a situation with witnesses who arrive for normal reasons, who see enough to question without being told what to question. I pause before continuing this memory, acknowledging the risk of noise. My hand wants to reach for the bell cord now. My voice wants to call out for towels, for water, for any excuse to bring someone to this door. But timing matters. Call too soon before the laundry staff are close enough to hear, and the summons fails. Call too desperately, and she can claim I'm being difficult, can frame my behavior as the problem rather than hers. I must wait for the moment when assistance is close enough to arrive quickly, when multiple people might hear, when response is automatic rather than questioned. Still, isolation is the greater danger. Every second this door remains closed is a second where her power is absolute, where her version of events is the only version where my vulnerability increases. I prepare to make the room public, not through accusation, not through confrontation, but through the simple act of requiring what any person preparing a bath might require: assistance with supplies, confirmation of arrangements, presence of others who verify that routines are being followed. The steam thins slightly. The water in the tub is cooling. The morning is advancing. Soon the governor's wife would normally be expected in the main house. Soon her absence will be noted if it continues. Time is both threat and ally. The longer this continues, the more dangerous it becomes for me. But also the more unusual it becomes. The more likely someone might notice, might question, might create the interruption that changes everything. I take a breath. I reach for the bell cord. I prepare to speak loudly enough to travel beyond this room. My hand finds the bronze weight where I placed it on the bench. It is still there. It reminds me that truth has weight, even when power tries to make it weightless. I recall Elda saying disputes die in daylight. The memory comes sharp and clear now, cutting through fear and calculation. My uncle standing in the counting house, explaining why he always conducted contentious negotiations in the main room rather than his private office. Darkness and privacy are where reasonable men become unreasonable, he said. Bring everything into daylight. Bring witnesses. Make the room too public for threats that cannot be spoken aloud. Most coercion dies when it must operate visibly. The memory sharpens my resolve. I am not attacking. I am not accusing. I am simply refusing to remain isolated, refusing to let this room stay private, refusing to accept that what happens here should be contained between two people with vastly unequal power. I test the bell cord lightly, just enough to travel. The brass bells in the kitchen will ring not emergency tone, but service request. Someone will hear. Someone will respond. The sound becomes my first move. 3 clear rings. Service requested in the bathing room. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, just routine summons that happens dozens of times daily throughout the governor's house. But the governor's wife knows. I know that every person who responds to that bell becomes a witness to something, even if they don't understand what they're witnessing. Footsteps approach and stop. I hear them clearly now, someone walking quickly down the corridor toward the bathing room. The laundry staff, probably, assuming towels or water or some supply is needed. I observe her posture stiffen. The governor's wife steps back slightly, away from me, positioning herself near the door but not blocking it. Her face composes itself into expression of authority and control. The reaction confirms fear of attention. She wanted privacy. She wanted isolation. She wanted this encounter to remain between us, where her power could operate without observation or accountability. But I have ended that privacy. Someone is coming. The door will need to open. And whatever happens next will happen with at least one witness present. A voice calls from outside. "Assistance needed, ma'am?" Male voice. One of the house staff. I recognize it, Thomas, who works with laundry and household maintenance. Young, efficient, careful to follow protocols. I keep my voice neutral and loud enough to carry. "Yes, thank you." Additional towels needed and cold water to adjust the temperature. The request is reasonable, routine, exactly the kind of thing that would justify ringing the service bell. But it is also loud. It establishes that I am here, that I am speaking, that I am requesting assistance through proper channels. The governor's wife's jaw tightens briefly, then relaxes. She has to respond now. She has to participate in this exchange, has to maintain appearance of normal household operation. One moment, she calls toward the door. My ally, tasked with linens, answers from the hall. "I have clean towels, ma'am," Thomas responds. His voice is professional, neutral. "Should I bring 'em in?" I observe recognition in the pause before speech. Thomas knows I am the one who rang the bell. He knows I am in the bathing room. He knows the governor's wife is also present. These facts are not unusual. Servants often assist with bathing preparations, but the combination, the timing, Something in the situation makes him pause just slightly before proceeding. His presence triggers my memory of chosen kinship formed under risk. I remember the dockworkers Samuel and Charleston, who spoke precise truth when inspectors needed verification. I remember Martha and Mr. Pemberton's household, who confirmed timelines when accusation tried to bend them. I remember all the moments when other enslaved people chose accuracy over safety, chose to witness clearly rather than pretend not to see. Thomas has not been told what is happening, but he senses something, and he is choosing to proceed carefully, to follow protocol exactly, to be present in a way that creates accountability, even without understanding why accountability is needed. We follow protocol, not protest. No one is accusing anyone. No one is claiming wrong has occurred. We are simply doing our jobs, following household routines, behaving exactly as servants are supposed to behave when assistance is requested. But protocol itself becomes protection. Protocol requires the door to open. Protocol requires interaction. Protocol requires witnesses who can later verify what was seen, what was said, what conditions existed. Please, I call toward the door. The towels are needed now. I request towels and water by the book, naming the room clearly. Towels and cold water for the bathing room, I repeat, my voice calm and professional. The temperature needs adjustment before the morning bath. I observe how naming space creates witnesses. I am not just requesting supplies. I am establishing location, establishing that I am in the bathing room, establishing that the governor's wife is also present, establishing that assistance is being requested through proper channels and proper circumstances. Thomas responds immediately. Understood. I'll bring both now. I hear him move toward the door. The latch rattles slightly as he tests it, finds it locked from inside. Ma'am? He says. The door is locked. New memory now. Only the plan unfolding. The door's authority weakens with each moment. It remains closed when protocol requires it to open. The longer the governor's wife delays, the more unusual the situation appears, the more questions accumulate without being asked directly. Yes, the governor's wife says. Her voice is controlled, but slightly strained. One moment, please. She looks at me. Her expression is complex anger, calculation, recognition that the situation has shifted beyond her complete control. Get out of the tub, she says quietly. Dry yourself. Dress. I comply quickly, grateful for the instruction that gives me legitimate reason to move, to clothe myself, to reduce my vulnerability. As I dry and dress, I hear more movement in the corridor. Other servants passing. Morning routines continuing. The bathing room is no longer isolated. It has become part of the household's traffic, part of its witnessed operations. The governor's wife walks to the door, but does not yet open it. She is making calculations. I can see in her face what to say, how to explain, what version of events to establish now that witnesses are present. That hesitation, that visible uncertainty tells me I have succeeded in something crucial. I have turned a private room into a public situation. I have made her power conditional rather than absolute. Whatever happens next will happen with witnesses present, and that changes everything. The lock remains engaged, but its power is broken. Thomas waits on the other side of the door, with towels I requested through proper channels. Other servants pass in the corridor, close enough to hear, close enough to notice delay. The governor's wife stands between me and the door, calculating what story to tell. When the bolt slides back, what explanation will preserve reputation while ending this moment? I am still trapped in this room, still vulnerable, still dependent on her willingness to open what she locked. But I am no longer isolated. I am no longer alone with power that operates in darkness. I have created witnesses without accusation, attention without confrontation, presence that makes coercion visible, even if it is not named. And now we wait she to choose her explanation. Me to survive whatever she chooses? The bronze weight is in my pocket again. It measures this moment's terrible balance. Isolation broken, but not safety achieved. Power challenged, but not defeated. Survival possible, but not certain. She reframes again, urging quiet resolution. The governor's wife leans closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I can hear. This doesn't need to become complicated. You rang 4 towels. I was checking on preparations. Everything is appropriate. When the door opens, you will confirm this. You will be respectful and brief, and then this moment ends. I observe the narrative strain under pressure of witnesses. She is trying to establish the story now, before Thomas enters, before more servants gather, before ambiguity can be interpreted in ways she does not control. The moment triggers my memory of traitors retreating when eyes gather. I remember a merchant in Cape Coast who tried to collect a debt that the debtor disputed. The merchant cornered the debtor in a back alley, speaking with aggressive certainty about payment owed and consequences for non-payment. But the debtor called out to passers-by, asked them to witness the confrontation, explained the dispute loudly enough for others to hear. The merchant's certainty evaporated as attention gathered. He retreated, claiming he would pursue the matter through proper channels, that this was not the appropriate time or place. The debt was never collected. Once made public, once subjected to scrutiny, he could not survive the examination. I repeat the request, unchanged. Thomas, the towels are still needed. And the cold water. Pleased. My voice is respectful, but clear. I am not arguing with the governor's wife. I am simply continuing to request what I requested: assistance with legitimate household task. But the repetition reinforces that something is unusual, that delay is occurring, that the normal flow of service has been disrupted. More servants pass. The corridor fills with sound. I hear multiple footsteps now, not just Thomas, but others. The laundry cart moving past. Someone sweeping. The morning kitchen staff passing with trays for breakfast service. I observe attention assemble without accusation. No one is demanding to know what is happening. No one is challenging the locked door or the delay. But people are present, are aware, are moving through the space in ways that make privacy impossible. The room becomes public by degrees. Not through dramatic intervention, but through the simple accumulation of witnesses who might hear, might notice, might remember if questioned later about what they observed this morning near the bathing room. Silence loses its grip. The governor's wife wanted containment, wanted this encounter to remain between us, known only to us, resolved on her terms, without outside interference. But containment requires isolation, and isolation is breaking down with each passing servant, each moment of delay, each question not answered. The white man thinks locked doors ensure privacy. He does not understand that privacy requires more than physical barriers. It requires absence of attention, absence of curiosity, absence of circumstances that make others wonder what is happening behind closed doors. And this situation assistance requested but door remaining locked. Routine service delayed without explanation. The governor's wife present during what should be simple preparation work creates exactly the kind of circumstances that generate quiet questions, that produce careful observation, that ensure memory. She unlocks the door herself, choosing control over escalation. The bolt slides back with a sound that seems louder than it should be. The door opens. Thomas stands in the corridor holding clean towels. Behind him, I see 2 other servants, one with a laundry cart, one sweeping the corridor floor, 3 witnesses, not counting others who might be just out of sight, who might hear, who might be aware that something unusual occurred, even if they didn't directly observe it. I observe the decision land without words. The governor's wife has chosen to end this encounter on terms that minimize damage rather than maximize control. She cannot maintain privacy any longer. She cannot keep the door closed without making the situation increasingly suspicious. So she opens it, steps aside, allows Thomas to enter with towels. "Thank you, Thomas," she says. Her voice is calm, authoritative, as if nothing unusual has occurred. "We were just reviewing the preparations. Everything is satisfactory. The plan holds because it never shouted. I did not accuse. I did not claim assault or threat or improper conduct. I simply rang a service bell, requested supplies, waited for response. Everything I did was proper, appropriate, within the bounds of servant behavior. But those proper actions created witnesses, and witnesses create accountability, even without explicit accusation." Thomas enters, places towels on the bench, glances at me briefly. His face is neutral, professional. but his eyes register what he sees me fully dressed, standing near the tub, the room filled with steam, the governor's wife present, the door having been locked from inside. Witnesses see enough. Not everything, not explicit wrongdoing, but enough to remember that something unusual occurred, enough to testify later if questions are asked, enough to make this moment exist in collective memory rather than remaining hidden in privacy. I am escorted out and wrapped in linens, watched closely. "Come," the governor's wife says to me. "We'll finish preparations in the main house." She does not touch me, but indicates I should walk ahead of her, should leave the bathing room, should move back into the public spaces of the household where we both exist in our proper role, she as authority, me as servant. I observe containment replace threat. The immediate danger is over. The room is open. Witnesses are present. But the situation is being managed now, being shaped into a version that protects reputation while ending the encounter. I am wrapped in clean linens by Thomas, a gesture that looks like service, but also creates physical barrier, creates propriety, creates visual evidence that I am being properly managed according to household protocols. The crisis has shifted into management. No one speaks of what happened. No one acknowledges that anything unusual occurred. But the way we move through the corridor, me walking ahead, the governor's wife following at a slight distance, Thomas and other servants present, and attentive creates structure that prevents further isolation, prevents any continuation of what might have continued if privacy had been maintained. We say nothing, but silence now is different than the silence she wanted earlier. Earlier silence would have meant I accepted her authority completely, accepted her version of events, accepted whatever she determined should happen in that locked room. This silence means something else. It means the encounter is over because circumstances made it impossible to continue, not because she chose to end it. It means containment through public presence rather than through private control. I have survived, but survival is complicated. The threat has ended, but its consequences remain uncertain. The household resumes routine with careful distance around me. Work continues. I am assigned to other duties: cleaning, preparing rooms, ordinary tasks that keep me visible and occupied. But I notice that I am never sent to private spaces alone. Always another servant is present, or the work is done during times when family members are absent. I observe avoidance where authority once pressed. The governor's wife does not summon me directly. She does not create situations where we might be alone or even proximately positioned. When she issues instructions about household tasks, she does so through other servants rather than addressing me personally. The change triggers my memory of disputes ended without verdict. In my land, this meant conflicts that were resolved not through formal judgment, but through altered behavior. Two neighbors who fought over land boundaries might never have the dispute formally adjudicated, but they would subsequently interact differently, avoiding each other, conducting necessary business through intermediaries, creating distance that prevented recurring confrontation. The dispute ended not because someone won, but because both parties recognized that continued engagement was more costly than separation. Power recalibrates quietly. The governor's wife retains her position, her authority, her status. I remain enslaved, remain subordinate, remain vulnerable to any explicit command she might issue. But within that unchanged structure, behavior has changed. She has learned that I will summon witnesses. She has learned that I understand how to use household protocols to create accountability. She has learned that isolating me carries risk of exposure. And I have learned that witnesses can be created without accusation, that protocol can be weaponed, that survival sometimes depends on making private moments public before they become irreversible. I am questioned about tasks, not the incident. The head housekeeper, an older white woman who manages most day-to-day operations, summons me 3 days after the bathing room incident. She reviews my duties with careful precision. Which rooms I clean, when, what procedures I follow. I observe how questions circle the edges without approaching the center. She does not ask what happened in the bathing room. She does not mention the locked door, the service bell, Thomas's response with towels. But the questioning itself communicates awareness. She knows something occurred. She is assessing whether I pose problem, whether my presence creates risk, whether my behavior was appropriate or challenging. No memory, now only consequence. The story is contained by omission. Nothing official has been said. No accusation has been made against the governor's wife or against me. But the silence is active, deliberate, strategic. By not speaking of it, by circling around it while clearly being aware of it, the household is managing the incident without formally acknowledging it. They are assessing, calculating, determining what adjustments need to be made to prevent recurrence without admitting that prevention is necessary. Your work is satisfactory, the housekeeper says finally. Continue as assigned, and remember that household protocols exist for everyone's protection. Following them exactly is important. The message is coded but clear. I did something right by following protocols, by ringing the bell, by requesting service through proper channels, and I should continue doing exactly that, following rules, maintaining propriety, using structure rather than challenging it. My ally is reassigned away from the washhouse. Thomas is moved to work in the gardens and outbuildings. The changes presented as practical reallocation of labor gardens need more attention during spring planting. His skills are better utilized outdoors, but I observe the costs land unevenly. Thomas responded to my service bell. Thomas witnessed the locked door, the delay, the governor's wife's presence in circumstances that required explanation. And now Thomas is being moved away from the interior household, away from proximity to family spaces, away from situations where he might witness or respond to similar incidents. The loss triggers my memory of survival's price. In my land, this meant the recognition that resistance, even successful resistance, creates consequences that extend beyond the person who resists. When one person challenges authority, others who supported them or witnessed their challenge often bear punishment that the primary person escapes. Thomas is not being harmed overtly, but he is being repositioned in ways that reduce his ability to witness, reduce his proximity to vulnerable situations, reduce his capacity to respond as he responded that morning. When I rang the bell, we exchanged no words about it. When we pass in the yard during his new garden duties, we nod acknowledgement, but we do not discuss what happened, what it cost him, whether he regrets responding when I called for towels. Some things cannot be discussed because discussing them would require acknowledging what everyone knows. But one is officially recognized. The bathing room incident exists in the liminal space of things that happen but are not spoken of. Things that change behavior but were not formally recorded. And Thomas's reassignment exists in the same space punishment that looks like practical management. Retaliation that wears the mask of routine adjustment. Visitors arrive and leave as if nothing occurred. The governor hosts a dinner party 2 weeks later. The house is cleaned and prepared with meticulous attention. Guests arrive in fine carriages. The bathing room is used by a visiting lady who requires privacy to freshen herself before dinner. I observe reputation repairing itself in public. Whatever whispers circulated after the incident among servants, among household staff, perhaps even among family are being smoothed over by the performance of normalcy. The house operates. The family entertains. Everything appears as it should. The contrast triggers my memory of ceremonies covering wounds. I remember festivals in Elmina that proceeded with elaborate celebration, even when the community had recently experienced loss or conflict. The festival was not denial of what happened, but a strategic performance of continuity, of resilience, of community cohesion that transcended individual suffering. We celebrate, my uncle explained once, not because we are happy, but because we refuse to let difficulty define us entirely. Public ceremony says, we continue, we remain, we are more than our wounds. The governor's household is doing similar work, not denying the incident, but covering it with layers of normal operation, social success, public propriety. By the time the dinner party concludes, any guest who might have heard vague rumors would see only a well-managed household functioning smoothly. I remain careful. Successful navigation of one danger does not guarantee protection from future dangers. The governor's wife has been checked, but not defeated. Her authority remains. Her capacity to create isolated situations remains if I become careless. If I allow myself to be placed in private spaces without witnesses, if I forget that survival requires constant vigilance. My hand finds the bronze weight in my pocket. It is still there. It reminds me that some measures survive every attempt to ignore them. Truth has weight, even when no one wants to acknowledge it. I am transferred to different duties, farther from private rooms. The head housekeeper informs me that I will no longer work in the main house interior. Instead, I am assigned to grounds, maintenance assisting with gardens, with outdoor structures, with work that keeps me visible and publicly positioned. I observe distance offered as solution. The household is managing risk by removing me from situations where private encounters might occur, where locked doors might create vulnerability, where the bathing room incident might repeat in different form. New memory now, only the path forward. I accept the reassignment without protest. Distance is protection. Being farther from family spaces means being less vulnerable to the kind of encounter that occurred in the bathing room. Safety replaces proximity. I lose whatever small privileges came with interior work shelter from weather, slightly lighter physical labor, proximity to better food and warmer spaces. But I gain visibility, public positioning, reduced likelihood of isolation. The white man thinks banishment is punishment. Sometimes it is protection. Sometimes being removed from the center is safer than being kept there, especially when the center contains dangers that visibility and witnesses can only partially mitigate. I work in the gardens now. I repair fences. I maintain outbuildings. The work is harder physically, but simpler psychologically. No locked doors. No private rooms, no situations where protocol alone must protect me from power operating in darkness. Time passes without repetition. Months go by. Spring turns to summer. The incident in the bathing room recedes into household memory, not forgotten, but no longer current, no longer discussed, no longer shaping daily interactions. I observe the absence speak louder than denial. The governor's wife never returned to that pattern of behavior. She does not create situations where she is alone with male servants in private spaces. She does not lock doors that should remain accessible. She does not isolate people in ways that require them to summon witnesses. The lock's power is gone because the room is never isolated again. Protocol stands now. The bathing room door remains unlocked during preparation work. 2 servants are typically present rather than 1. The service bell is answered promptly when rung. These changes are not announced. No new rules are written. No official adjustment to household procedures is documented. But behavior has changed. Systems have adjusted. The structure now prevents what protocol alone previously struggled to prevent. That is when I know that survival sometimes looks like nothing happening. The victory is not dramatic confrontation or public vindication. The victory is simply that the threat does not repeat, that danger does not recur, that the situation which created vulnerability no longer exists in the same form. I prepare to leave the house on a routine assignment that does not return. After 8 months in the gardens, I am told I will be transferred to the governor's country propertia, smaller house 30 miles away that requires additional labor during harvest season. The transfer is described as temporary, but I understand it may be permanent. Distance is being increased. My proximity to the main house, to the governor's wife, to the space where the incident occurred, all of it is being maximized. I observe the corridor once more as I collect my few possessions. The bathing room door is visible from where I stand. It is propped open. Someone is cleaning inside. Ordinary maintenance. Nothing unusual. The door remains unlocked in daylight. That detail matters more than anyone watching would understand. It means the lesson was learned. The adjustment was made. The system corrected itself just enough to prevent what I had to prevent, through ringing a bell and naming a room and requesting towels. I walk on. I do not linger. I do not look back at the bathing room or the corridor or the spaces where I worked and survived for nearly a year. The bronze weight is in my pocket. It will go with me to the country property. It goes everywhere I go. It is the only constant across every reassignment, every transfer, every new configuration of power and vulnerability. I pause before ending this account. I am sitting in a wagon that will take me to the country property. My possessions fit in a small cloth bundle. Everything I own, everything I carry, everything that marks my existence in this world, it fits in a space smaller than the bathing room where I nearly lost everything. She believed the lock would end the story. The governor's wife believed that closing the door, controlling the space, managing the narrative would be sufficient. She believed privacy was absolute, that what happened in locked rooms could be shaped entirely by whoever held power in those rooms. But rooms lose their power when they gain witnesses. A locked door is only as strong as the isolation it creates. Break the isolation, and the lock becomes irrelevant. I lived because I turned silence into presence and let the house choose containment over harm. I did not defeat her through strength or argument. I did not convince her to change her behavior through moral appeal. I simply made it impossible for her to continue by ending the privacy she required. I summoned the witnesses through protocol. I created attention through proper channels. I made the house itself choose between allowing harm to continue visibly or ending it quietly. The house chose containment. Not because it valued me, not because it was just, but because continuing openly would have required explanations, would have created scandal, would have damaged reputations in ways that quietly ending the encounter did not. In my land, this meant wisdom about fighting power with structure rather than force. My uncle taught me that direct opposition usually fails, but power constrained by its own rules, forced to operate visibly, required to explain itself, that power often retreats rather than face exposure. You cannot defeat them, he said, but you can survive them, and survival is its own victory when the alternative is erasure. I have survived. The bathing room incident ended without violence, without assault, without the harm that would have occurred if that door had remained locked, if witnesses had never assembled, if silence had been maintained. That is not justice, but it is outcome, and when justice is not available, outcome is what we measure. I do not forget. I never forget. This memory joins all the others: the counting house in Charleston where truth spoke through numbers, the inland plantation where Margaret stumbled on uneven ground, Mr. Pemberton's house where rules protected me from baseless accusation. Each memory is lesson. Each survival is instruction. Each moment when structure protected me more than mercy teaches me how to navigate the next situation, the next danger, the next time when protocol must become shield because no other shield exists. The wagon begins to move. The governor's house disappears behind trees. I am leaving but carrying everything that matters: memory, knowledge, the bronze weight that measures truth across every distance. And that is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. The country property is smaller, less formal, less concerned with reputation. The work is agricultural planting, harvesting, animal care. The oversight is direct, but less complex. Fewer locked doors, fewer private spaces, fewer situations where protocol alone must protect me. I worked there for 3 years before being sold to a merchant in a neighboring county. The sale is not punishment or reward. It is simply transaction, the ordinary circulation of enslaved people through the economy of bondage. But I carry with me the knowledge that locked doors can be opened, that isolation can be broken, that witnesses can be summoned through proper channels when summoning them through improper channels would invite destruction. I teach this knowledge carefully to others. I meet not explicitly, not in ways that could be called instruction in resistance, but through stories that sound like personal history, through observations that sound like casual reflection, through sharing that sounds like nothing more than one survivor talking to another. Bells can be rung, I might say. Service can be requested. Protocol can be followed precisely when precision itself becomes protection. And those who need to hear it understand. Those who might face similar isolation, similar danger, similar moments when locked doors make power absolute, they understand that protocol is not just submission, that following rules can be form of resistance, that structure itself can be weapon when wielded with precision. The bronze weight remains in my pocket through every subsequent house, every new owner, every different configuration of authority. It reminds me that some truths cannot be locked away, that some measures survive every door, that weight persists even when forced into smallest spaces. I am still alive, still carrying memory, still measuring truth that others tried to make weightless. And that memory of a locked door opened, of isolation broken, of witnesses summoned through nothing more than a service bell and proper words that memory protects me and everyone I share it with. That is enough.